This is International Political Economy, December 2, 2008. Many critics of corporate capitalism and corporate globalization argue that multinational corporations and corporations in general have too much power, that they are not subject to public oversight, that they are too oriented toward short-term profits, and that they're insufficiently loyal to traditional local communities. Also, critics argue that they're willing to engage in questionable practices such as industrial espionage, advertising unhealthy products, especially to children, and that they use corporate responsibility, public relations, as a cover for their unethical activities. In one response to the critics is to argue for greater global governance, where the power of multinationals is checked by other actors, including non-governmental organizations, in what's called the Multi Stakeholder Approach. So most international organizations are intergovernmental, in which only government officials are participants. Business groups are very good at lobbying their home governments or even their host governments for things that they want. And in order to counter the strength of business, many non-governmental organizations ask for the right to participate directly in international forums. This is called the Multi-Stakeholder Approach. An example is the Digital Opportunity Taskforce, DOTforce, set up by the Group of 8 in the year 2000, and which basically lasted for 2 years. This was supposed to address the question of bridging the global digital divide. The task force was composed of government officials, business representatives, and representatives of non-governmental organizations. It met for 2 years and produced a report, which you can find by clicking through on Report. Another example would be the Financial Action Task Force, set up in 1989 by the Group of 8 to deal with international money laundering problems. It had 33 members as of 2003. After September 11, the Financial Action Task Force was asked to get involved with the financing of terrorist acts, and the basic underlying rationale for including non-governmental actors on the Financial Action Task Force was to have the kind of expertise that government officials didn't have put to use in trying to detect the financing of terrorism. So why is there this trend toward multi-stakeholder governments? Well, the power of corporations is obviously one thing, the need to check the power of corporations, but also to make global governance more legitimate, to legitimize it to different groups. Now, it doesn't mean that multi-stakeholder governance is going to always be possible when military strategic issues are primary, such as, for example, discussions of nuclear weapons or weapons proliferation or something like that. That would tend to remain in the intergovernmental realm. Similarly, on highly controversial political issues, such as immigration, you would not expect to see direct representation of either business or non-governmental organization. Eventually, this kind of supplement to intergovernmental governance is going to need to be turned into more democratic forms. We're beginning to see how this works in the European Union as it moves towards more genuine kinds of democratic practices with greater transparency and greater accountability of often elected officials within the European Union. I'm going to switch gears here and talk about Naomi Klein's arguments about branding and brand name politics. So she argues that among anti-globalization folks and people critical of, particularly of environmental issues, there's a tendency to focus in on ready-made targets, such as people who are killing dolphins or whales or turtles. You have something similar on the anti-corporate side, where large corporate brands such as McDonald's, Starbucks, Wal-Mart, and Nike become the target for anti-corporate politics. Klein argues that it's just as it's important not to focus only on the cuddly animals in the environment, you need to also think about less familiar brands in the world political economy. Well, let's look at a couple of examples of targeted companies. McDonald's would be a great example, and if you click through to these various sites, you'll see some both defense and criticism of McDonald's, the corporate website obviously being a defense, but anyway, enjoy. There's also pro and anti-Starbucks sites. The first site on the list is the official Starbucks site, and the rest are critical of Starbucks, and just thought you would enjoy the picture of Brittany enjoying her Frappuccino there. Here are some Nike pro and anti-Nike sites, and I thought you would like the swoosh logo with the guy impaled on it. But Nike has been particularly criticized for its sweatshop type contract labor operations, particularly in Asia. Friedman has a bunch of rules for companies in the age of globalization, basically telling companies not to insulate themselves too much from the world economy, but to search inside themselves for the strengths and to correct their weaknesses. Thinks that small firms, thanks to the internet and other technologies, are able to act like big firms, and big firms need to act like small firms to be more competitive, more flexible. He says that companies are good, the best companies in the world are good at collaborating with other companies. There's even a phrase for that. It's called co-opetition. They'll be teaching that in business schools for about a decade now. And said get regular X-rays and sell the results to clients. So do your internal analysis, and maybe you could even make some money on publicizing your internal analysis to other suppliers and contractors and so forth. He encourages firms to outsource, but not in order to reduce the size of the firm, but rather to make themselves more competitive. And he says that you can actually be an idealist and outsource for the right reasons, and those right reasons include leveling the playing field for the rest of the people in the world economy. Okay, here's a cartoon about outsourcing, which I hope you'll enjoy. Here is some points in the Friedman book about what he calls the unflat world. He says the reason why some countries and people in those countries can't participate in the global economy is because they're too sick, they're too disempowered, they're too frustrated, and strangely enough, he adds too many Toyotas. That means basically that some countries that are fast growing are the people are buying lots of automobiles, and with the obvious result of congestion and air pollution. And he shows there's a picture there of traffic jam in Beijing, I believe. He also has the Dell theory of conflict prevention. Quote, the advent and spread of just-in-time global supply chains in the flat world are an even greater restraint on geopolitical adventurism than the more general rising standard of living that McDonald's symbolized. So his earlier theory was the McDonald's theory, and now he's replacing that with the Dell theory. A couple slides on Al-Qaeda and terrorists benefiting from globalization. The quote says, Al-Qaeda has learned to use many of the same instruments for global collaboration that Infosys uses, but instead of producing products and profits with them, it has produced mayhem and murder. The flat world, unfortunately, is a friend of both Infosys and Al-Qaeda. The picture shows Osama bin Laden next to Ayman al-Zawahiri, the #2 guy in Al-Qaeda, and there's their flag. Friedman uses the term Islamo-Leninism, which he defines in the following quote: the system that we call Islamism, an ideological, highly politicized Islam in which the spiritual content, the personal relationship with God, is taken out of Islam and instead is transformed into a religious ideology like fascism or communism. But unlike the Leninists who wanted to install a reign of the perfect class, Al-Qaeda leaders wanted to install the reign of perfect religion. One of the things we have to do in social science is to get away from the polemics and the extreme views of both pro and anti-globalization advocates, and to try to basically check to see who's right on the facts. Social science includes normative aspects of what should and shouldn't be, or what should and shouldn't be done, but it also involves a kind of empirical research where one tries to check theories with various ways of collecting data, otherwise called facts, but data are data. They're always imperfect. Okay, so there's an agenda, and the agenda includes measuring various dimensions of globalization, looking at the question of whether what we call globalization is actually regionalization instead of actually globalization. There's the flatness versus spikiness issue, and then there's the question of the relative importance of different actors in the global political economy. I have some examples on this slide of different ways of measuring globalization, for example, and also measuring things that could be either independent or dependent variables with respect to globalization, such as the reduction in tariffs and non-tariff barriers. Trade and foreign investment flows could be increased as a result of the reduction of trade and investment barriers. You have the question of whether globalization produces more or less inequality over time, and other factors could also be obviously measured empirically.